All right, everyone. Up until a couple of months ago, it looked like Keith Ellison up in Minnesota, he's running for Attorney General, would have no significant problem with getting into that position. He was favored by 5 to 10 points in the polls. It's a state that leans blue, generally speaking, and Ellison was at least a mid to high tier Democrat, fairly recognizable. Deputy DNC head. Bernie Sanders wanted him to head the DNC completely, which I wonder, is Bernie Sanders regretting the fact, rape poem from the 70s aside, is Bernie Sanders regretting the fact that an alleged repeat girlfriend beater is the person he wanted to head the whole fucking Democratic Party? No, he's not going to talk about it because no one will pressure him because it happens to be a fucking Democrat. Keith Ellison is a far left, theocratic style, a new wave Democrat. Thankfully, though, it looks like now he's going to lose. He's 5 points behind his opponent. Now, and this is a fairly recent thing. This is in the wake of new allegations, the unsealing of his divorce records, which some people, and I haven't looked into it quite enough to determine this for myself, some people are saying it's kind of odd that they were unsealed. Like, it doesn't really have much to do with the other allegations and should have been a right to privacy issue. Maybe. And the fact that he's, alleged to do this, that's just an allegation. The allegation is not proof of anything, but when your constituents are far left, by and large, when your constituents have pink hair and Me Too hashtag tattoos, being alleged to have beaten your girlfriend's probably not the greatest campaign strategy among those groups. And Ellison, he keeps ignoring the issue. Here's the problem. Here's the big problem. It's sort of like with Cory Booker and he might have propositioned a gay dude in a bathroom in 2014 thing. The problem is a failure to address things more than anything else. To their credit, in some cases, certain politicians, they immediately address. It's like when Kavanaugh, it's like, oh, I allege that he groped me up at a party, when he was fucking 17 and he was probably plastered, but he groped me up and stuff. And he comes out, he immediately says it didn't happen. Keith Ellison dragged his heels, and that started to look a little bit odd. And finally, he has to respond, and it's very brief. It's like, basically, no, I didn't beat my girlfriend. We condemn the unsealing of these divorce records that, again, contain basically an allegation of physical and verbal abuse. If he were a Republican, if Keith Ellison were a Republican running for AG in a state, it would be front page news every single day. He'd be roundly Me Too'd. It would trend worldwide. Everyone would call for him to step aside, and the Republicans themselves eventually would call for the same. They'd call for the same. They'd do the same with Kavanaugh. Someone going for a much more important position, they barely at the 11th hour sort of circle the wagons to defend him when it becomes clear that there's no further evidence beyond mere allegation. With a case where it's several allegations and a divorce record and they're running for a lower office, they're not going to bother defending. They're not going to waste their time because they're afraid. The Republicans are cowards. They'll back down. Don't expect a Republican to back you up. The Republican will talk a big game, but ultimately when it comes down to it, they're going to save their own skin. The Democrats are much more likely to defend one another, in all honesty. They do this primarily because they always get the moral high ground. And the Republicans let them get away with it without needing to. The Republicans could easily take the moral high ground in virtually any of these cases, if they had proper strategy in mind. Instead, they're led by people like Karl Rove, which explains why they're losers in many cases. But with Keith Ellison, it's not going to be the Republicans knocking him out, which is hilarious. And think, this is Minnesota. It's a state with, maybe a rising Islamic population, a lot of social justice warriors in the urban areas. Ellison should be, 10 points ahead, all things considered. Instead, he's behind. It's his own voters punishing him. It's the social justice warriors. So essentially, this doesn't even represent a majority of the left, but to their credit, a minority of people on the left are at least ideological enough that they are willing to even punish a Democrat or self-proclaimed liberal for violating the same things for which they would definitely jump down the throat of a right-winger or a Republican or something. There are some of them that are willing to do that, and it's just enough to stick in the craw of local and state-level races among the Democratic Party. Why do you think Franken is out? Why do you think Franken had to resign? It's not that the average Democrat looked at the one picture that they had as evidence that he groped up a sleeping reporter, which is what it is. Lawyer statement and excuses and propaganda aside, that's what it depicts. He was groping a sleeping woman. I doubt it was part of a play. Here's the thing, though. A minority, that's all you need. A minority of the Democrats got together with basically all the Republicans and any sane, independent-minded individual, forming enough of a majority to force him out. The same looks likely to happen to Ellison. Look, you've got 2 weeks left in the midterms. And then, of course, the 2020 election begins literally the next day, and I fucking can't wait. I'm like, I need 10 times the caffeine from here on forward. It looks like his own voters are going to keep him from getting the position because they're going to stay home or they're going to punish him because they're going to be like, well, we're not going to be hypocrites. Good on you, by the way. If you worried about Kavanaugh being on SCOTUS, based merely on several allegations by people he had associated with, and you thought he shouldn't be confirmed for that, then you have no choice but to oppose Keith Ellison for AG in Minnesota unless you want to be a total hypocrite. It's basically the same story. Sexual, verbal, and physical abuse, multiple counts, unsealed divorce records, witnesses, and the whole 9 yards. Now, of course, that's still just allegations and tangential hearsay evidence. There's no proof that he did any of these things. But again, if you called for Kavanaugh not to be nominated for that position, you should definitely apply the same to Keith Ellison. Now, I would say it's just, there's a little bit of a difference. There's one difference. An appointed position versus an elected one. In the elected position, it is very much nothing more than the public will. It's very much a trial by public majority. It's pure 51% carries at politics. It's a little bit different than when you're talking about being confirmed by a Senate that's already been determined and is highly partisan. Here with Keith Ellison, I would expect a lot of his voters will flee him. He's no longer has an above 50-50 chance of winning. However, you've got to understand, this is just one polling round. It could go back the other way in the next 2 weeks. But the thing is, there's not a whole lot of time left to campaign. The clock is quickly winding down towards the point at which there can't even be an October surprise. It's getting too late in the game. The October surprise is right now, within midterm politics. Claire McCaskill probably getting fucked out of her position. Keith Ellison probably getting fucked out of his position. Elizabeth Warren being a huge shackle around the neck of the Democratic Party. And the fact that the left has probably screwed itself on the migration issue and will continue to do so for some days or a couple weeks to come. None of these things benefit the Democrats. That's why the Republicans are slowly gaining back the capability of retaining the House. That's why the Senate is now basically out of the Democrats' hands. I would expect if the election were held today, the Democrats still narrowly take the House, but it's not a blue wave. They lose power in the Senate. They lose 3 or 4 seats. That looks good for the Republicans. It doesn't look bad for them, certainly. That's about all. Peace out.